We are here with Eghosa, or Miss E, as the students refer to you as. And you are like, you've never been in my house, but I feel like you are because my daughter Claire, who's a senior at Cal High, talks about you all the time. I'm like, do you go to anybody else's class? Because that's all you talk about is Miss E. But tell us a little bit, well, first of all, thank you for being here.
For sure.
Yeah, and sitting down with us, and tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do.
I currently am in my 15th year teaching at Cal High, started right out of college. And I'm also a doctoral student at the University of San Francisco. I'm currently starting my 3rd year there. So balancing all of that, and I live in West Oakland.
Talk a little bit about, and I'm not joking around, like you have had such an influence on our daughter and many others, which has been pretty cool. But talk a little bit about what you're teaching at Cal High.
Probably around my 5th year, I started creating my own curriculum because I wanted it to be a little bit more in line with who I am as a person and what I value and what I think students should get out of being in school, which is not really just memorizing and regurgitating, but like how can we create conversation that allows them to think critically about different things. And we do lit circles where there's a variety of books. But the core of all of that is how can I elicit discussion that students can understand the world around them, but also learn the things that we need to learn.
How would you encourage somebody to use Black History Month to educate ourselves, to talk about it, but more importantly, it's like to live this 365 days out of the year?
Basically, when Black History Month comes, I don't do anything different because I think a lot of my curriculum, I'm putting in those voices all the time. So students are getting a lot of different perspectives. And I think as a school, we tend to it's Black History Month, let's focus on all these things. But when it comes to education, all core classes, there should be element of multiple voices, acknowledging the contributions of different people. And so I think for outside of school, it's really like, how do we normalize other voices being part of our history? How do we normalize understanding the value that counter narratives bring to this country? If more people began to make that a normal thing instead of just this one blip in the year, I think that would be really helpful overall, because then it's just part of who we are.
Yeah. Talk more about that, the dominant narratives. What are you talking about? What are you referring to?
In school, in the media, we do get, one perspective more than others. For me, dominant narratives are in an English class where we highlight the works of, Emerson, or we read The Great Gatsby or things like that, but forget about some of the pivotal literature from people like Toni Morrison or Alice Walker. And the literary canon is very much saturated with white voices, and I think it's really important for us to find value in some of these other ones.
So being a teacher, what gets you most excited, when you see the aha moment, with students, what is that like?
For me, it's also students who graduate and then come back and they're like, this whole thing shifted the way that I thought about the world. In the classroom, seeing students engage in dialogue and learn from each other, because that's another philosophy of mine. I am the teacher, but we are a learning community. So as a learning community, how are we going to learn from one another? And so to see them push back on different thoughts, to challenge each other, to support each other, to get, a broader picture about the world around them is really, that to me, that's the purpose.
How do you stay encouraged? I mean, we get the newsletters, with the racist drawings, the slurs, the things that have been said over Zoom, things that have been said in your classroom or whatever. Why? Why would you continue to stay and to put up with it?
It is very challenging, especially because there are just very few teachers that look like me in the district. And of course at Cal High, I'm the only. I have to root myself very much in students. That's really what it comes down to. If I start to think about all the structural things that are happening, things at the district, things at the administrative level that are really frustrating and discouraging for teachers, I'll feel very unsupportive and unsupported and lacking motivation, right? But if I root everything in the students and what I'm getting from them, what they're getting from me, it makes it a lot easier to kind of focus on that. So I do insulate myself very much in my classroom with my students, and that's where I get most of my energy. That is the only reason I think that I can keep moving, is kind of what I get from those students, and knowing out of the 160 that I have every year, there's a good chunk of students who are getting something that is very pivotal to them.
That's incredible. I don't want to just keep going on to the next thing. Like, I'm sitting here, I'll have to watch this again to process some of that. I remember the parent-teacher conference, looking around your room, and I'm just like, there is deep purpose and cause in this room. It's not fluffy. It's not like, you don't look at it as like, okay, we got to get this across today. We got to get this. Like, you are long game. Like, you are long term. Like, where did that come from?
I think a lot of that is rooted in my experience as a student. Basically, I've had schools that were considered very rough, schools considered suburban, and then schools that are considered very privileged. For me, the one constant thing is just how uncomfortable that place was for me, or someone that looks like me, to be in school, to be learning, to not see myself in the curriculum. And so for me, a lot of who I am as a teacher is definitely thinking back to what I experienced as a student, and how can I shift that experience for my students coming up. I think that's a big part of why I went into teaching. I wanted to change from the inside.
Going back to that previous question, you're like, your hope is in students. Can't be in administration, can't be in all those different things, or I'll lose focus, or I'll lose steam in what I'm doing. What can we be doing better as parents? Like, to not just accept the ways of our parents and just say, well, this is kind of, I'm not going to change anything, and it is the way it is. I believe this, and I'll keep my beliefs to myself. It's like, what can we be doing as parents?
So I think access to information is out there in a different way, where you can curate what you're getting, which can be dangerous and which can be awesome. Dangerous because you can curate it to where you're only hearing everything that aligns with what you're thinking. But it's also super dope because you can actually change that. You can follow people with different perspectives, looking at the media and news and like where they fall. There are some that are super right. There are some that are super left. There are some that are more neutral, left-leaning, right-leaning. And knowing that information, okay, see what people are saying from all these different perspectives. So I think having that access and disrupting the echo chamber is really important. And I think we can do that because of all the information that's out there. And I think social circles are important too. I think it's really easy to, if you're growing up in San Ramon, you live in San Ramon, your social circle looks and thinks similarly to you, and expanding that, trying to find friends who have different life experiences, and having conversations with those folks and listening, I think is part of it.
What gives you hope for the next generation?
Especially with education now, we have a lot of pushback on historical truths, on conversations that might be uncomfortable. For me, all I can do is think about the students that are in front of me that are going to be this next generation's leaders, people in positions of power, citizens, whatever, and that they are able to digest information, critically think about information in a way that's better than what we have now, the people who are leading us now. I have to put a lot of my hope in younger people. And I have to put a lot of my hope in education. I know education is under attack right now, but I do think folks being able to learn and critically think is really key to us moving past some of the things that are causing us to be really stagnant as a country.
I just want to say this. Thank you for your leadership. You obviously have so many gifts and so much to offer, and you could take that anywhere. I'm kind of selfish, and I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you're in our district. I'm glad you're in San Ramon. And but just the influence that you have, like I have to believe, in my world, it's like if one person gets it or if one person understands, it was worth it. Definitely. And I think there's some times where you might feel like, man, I'm doing this every single day. Is it worth it? And it's like, if it were just for one, it would be worth it. I always tell somebody when they encourage me that way, they're like, I'm like, yeah, but we spent a lot of money and I spent a lot of time. It's like, but it is like, because you never know, right? How that's going to impact and the ripple effects of all of that. Anything else you want to talk about?
The last thing that I'll say is that I hope, folks watching this or folks who have students in school make it a point to kind of normalize some of those counter narratives, some of those voices that get pushed to the margins in a way that I think is beneficial to all students.